Welcome to World Gone Weird, discussing what the heck is going on in the world today.
Yeah, what's the latest disaster this week?
Hey everyone, let's try to keep it, somewhat positive, even if it's hard.
Positive? Is that still a thing? I thought we canceled that subscription years ago.
Right, so let's jump in. There's this new info about the New Orleans attack. Apparently, the guy, Jabbar, made 2 prior trips to the city, using smart glasses to record video of the area eventually targeted. That's chillingly calculated.
See? That's exactly what I'm talking about. It's never just some lone wolf. Always pre-planned, always something bigger going on. These people aren't just spontaneously deciding to drive trucks into crowds.
Well, the FBI is saying he acted alone, at least in terms of the execution. But yeah, the planning, it's definitely disturbing. It highlights how vulnerable our public spaces are.
Oh, vulnerable. You mean like a toddler trying to assemble an IKEA bookshelf? Yeah, we're screwed.
It's not just vulnerability, it's the level of preparation. Smart glasses? That's sophisticated for a supposedly lone actor. It also brings in the question of technology being used as a surveillance tool for terrorist activities, which is scary.
Exactly. Who's giving him these smart glasses and those private sale silencers? Come on, there's got to be a bigger network behind this. The authorities are probably just covering their tracks again, like always.
I don't think it's necessarily a cover-up. It could just be that they haven't found all the connections yet. It's a complex investigation, and these things take time. They're still trying to figure out his motives.
Oh, motives? I bet his motive was chaos. The new hotness in global interior design. I mean, what else explains all of this?
I think it's interesting they are also looking into his trips to Egypt and Canada. Now that's interesting. It's not necessarily a huge coincidence, but does open a few ideas up. I wonder if there is a direct link there.
See? There it is. Egypt and Canada. I knew it. You just don't travel to places like that for fun these days. There's always something else going on. I mean, we haven't discussed the Canadian government and their issues.
Well, we don't know that yet. There isn't any evidence it's directly linked. It could be that he was just visiting family, or it could be something more. It's too early to jump to conclusions.
Family vacation in Egypt. Sounds like a vacation from reality. I bet the brochure was printed on a very special kind of paper.
Okay, but putting aside potential connections, let's look at the broader picture here. How easily someone can acquire weapons, the privately made silencer, the fact that this guy was a former soldier. There's a lot of worrying things happening that are being overlooked as isolated incidents.
Exactly. And it's not just guns. The technology is also a problem. Smart glasses that record everything, all that data just floating around, and some of it is clearly going to the wrong hands. Nobody is paying attention.
I think the authorities are trying to address these things, but it's a constant game of catch-up. Technology develops so quickly, and it's hard to regulate everything. I mean, look at social media. We see how that's used to spread hate. And now we're seeing something similar with attack planning.
Catch-up? They're not even in the race, let alone playing catch-up. They're like a toddler trying to catch a greased pig in a bouncy castle. It's sad, really.
And that leads us into the broader concept of the unseen hand, right? We see these events, like the New Orleans attack, and we only see the surface. But there are so many layers beneath, with potential actors pulling the strings we can't see.
Exactly. There has to be. It's not like these guys just wake up and decide to do this. There's indoctrination, funding, training. All of that is being facilitated by someone, somewhere.
Well, sometimes it is just one person who has fallen down an extreme rabbit hole, unfortunately. But yes, there can be larger networks involved. I think it's important we look at the root causes of radicalization, the reasons why people are so vulnerable to these influences. I mean, the guy in New Orleans was an ex-soldier, and there seems to be a theme of disenfranchised individuals turning to this sort of thing.
Yeah, the root cause, they're bored. That's it. They're like, I'm going to cause chaos now because my Netflix is buffering. It's the only logical explanation.
I think that's oversimplifying a complex issue, but it's interesting that he was a former soldier. We've seen that a few times now, right? There's something about that specific type of training and the mindset that goes with it that might, if the person becomes disenfranchised, turn them into dangerous individuals. And that's an interesting angle.
It's not just interesting, it's a warning. We're training people to kill, then we're releasing them back into society and hoping everything's going to be okay. What happens to all these individuals when they leave the armed forces? Do they just, go back to being normal citizens? I think not. There's a lack of support there.
I think you're right about the need for more support, especially for veterans struggling with PTSD and other issues. There's a lot that can be done to help reintegrate them into civilian life. And yes, that might help prevent things like this, but it is a lot more complicated than just training people and releasing them. These are complex individuals with complex issues.
Yeah, well, they should have reintegration classes. I'm thinking like a course on how to not blow things up for 101. I would teach it, but I have a class on advanced sarcasm that I can't miss.
I think that's a fair point, that society has to do more in order to help these people that have been sent into harm's way, in order to protect them, and society in general. It's our duty of care to ensure these people are not left by the wayside, especially after that type of training. It's a recipe for disaster.
Exactly. It's a cycle. We create these monsters, and then we act all shocked when they turn around and bite us. And that's just one layer of it. There are the shadowy organizations, the state-sponsored groups. They all use this sort of thing to destabilize.
I think it's important to not fall into the conspiracy trap here. While there are probably shadowy organizations out there, it's easy to blame everything on them when there are a lot of issues that are at play that don't need a shadowy organization to make them happen and are based on existing failings.
Well, it's always a conspiracy. It's the only way I can sleep at night. Knowing there's some secret group of lizard people out there with an evil plan makes a lot more sense than the reality of it all.
But it's important to understand what is and isn't a conspiracy theory. There are definitely actors who operate in the shadows, using propaganda and disinformation to fuel unrest and create chaos. Look at how Russia operates, for example, using online trolls and disinformation campaigns to interfere with elections in multiple countries and stoke flames in Ukraine. They don't hide that.
Exactly, but it's not just Russia. I think there is a lot of influence at play from various sides, and they all benefit from the chaos and uncertainty. It makes them more powerful, and it keeps us all distracted. It also makes the masses look to the powers that be for solutions to what they created.
I don't think it's about actively trying to be evil. Some of the shadowy groups have vested interests. It's more about power dynamics and maintaining their positions of control. These groups often operate without any sense of empathy or accountability, which is a big part of the problem. They exploit existing vulnerabilities and create chaos to serve their own purposes.
Oh, they're definitely evil. They meet in dark rooms, probably drink the blood of like a very unlucky hamsters, cackling manically as they plan our demise. It's more fun to think that way than believing it's a bunch of rich guys arguing over money.
The thing is, it's almost impossible to trace this unseen hand directly, and it's always, an assumption that we're dealing with actors in the background. But let's consider that the FBI is also saying that the guy had a truck with a transmitter in it for the IEDs that didn't go off. That's more than just a bit of homemade work. That takes planning, and that indicates the level of involvement and the type of expertise involved.
See? Transmitters, IEDs, silencers. These aren't just homemade things. This is professional equipment. So who's supplying that and how? And again, this is why I question the official narrative, because there's always something hidden or missed out. It's never just as simple as the media portrays it.
Well, the FBI did say the silencer was bought in a private sale, but I agree that the planning and bomb making indicate a certain level of expertise. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a shadowy group. It could be just a bunch of people who have the know-how. But I do think we have to look at the spread of information. Look how easy it is to find instructions online for all sorts of illegal and terrible things.
Oh, the internet. The great enabler. I bet the IED instructions had pop-up ads for, like, buy one, get one free for a limited time only. It's how they get you.
It's not funny, but it's a good point. The internet, social media, it's a double-edged sword, right? It can be used to connect people, but it's also used to radicalize, to spread misinformation, and teach people how to do terrible things. I wonder if there's a correlation between the increase in social media and the type of attacks that we're seeing.
Of course there is. Everything is linked. Social media is just another tool in their arsenal, and it's so effective because it preys on emotions, on divisions, and on people's existing frustrations. The fact people are so easily manipulated is the main issue.
I think we need to also focus on media literacy and critical thinking skills. We have to teach people how to evaluate information, how to spot bias, and how to identify disinformation. It's not enough just to say, don't believe everything you read online. We need to teach people how to recognize what is true and what is not. And that's a tricky task for most of the population to grasp at.
Media literacy sounds like a boring class. I'm going to invent sarcasm literacy, where you just tell people the opposite of what you mean and see if they get it. It's the only thing that makes sense to me.
But it's true, it's an educational issue. How do you get people to critically think when people generally take the path of least resistance? It's a big ask for society as a whole. How do we combat this rise in attacks? With education. with government oversight. It seems there are too many variables to control in the modern age.
I don't think education alone will do it. We need to be more critical of the media, more skeptical of our governments, and we need to demand transparency so we can see the unseen hand at play. Because these are not random events. They're connected, and there's someone, somewhere, who's pulling the strings.
I agree that we need to be critical, but I also think we need to be hopeful. We can't give in to cynicism and despair. There are solutions, but they require collective action and a willingness to work together to create a better world. We need to focus on building strong communities and promoting peace and understanding.
Oh, hope. Is that the new positive? I'm out of stock on both of those. I'm starting a business selling cynical realism. It's like hope, but with more sarcasm. It's the only thing that will sell nowadays.
But look at the second story here today. We have millions facing this huge winter storm. And, yeah, it seems unrelated, but is it? How easily can the systems be disrupted by an attack such as the one in New Orleans if it were done on a national or global scale? We are seeing disruptions due to the weather now. What happens if the power grid fails? Due to the weather, or due to human influence, or due to some other form of attack?
Exactly. Chaos creates opportunity. This whole storm, maybe it's a natural event, but maybe it's something else. I don't trust these things anymore. Everything is so easy to manipulate. The weather, power grids, communication networks, all of it is so vulnerable. And a lot of it is interconnected too. A failure of one thing leads to a failure of everything else.
I think that's a little extreme. Weather patterns change, that's what weather is. But I do agree that the interconnectedness is something we need to focus on. And yes, we should always be working to improve the resilience of our systems, especially vital systems like the power grid. However, is that down to someone unseen hand? Probably not. Most of the failures are due to a lack of oversight and funding.
Oh, it's all a giant snow globe, and some kid somewhere is having way too much fun shaking it. I'm waiting for the tiny dinosaurs to appear and try to eat the tiny people.
But even if we assume it's just weather, look at the impact it's having. Over 29,000 people without power in Missouri alone. That is a huge amount of people in the U.S. Roads are impassable, and there are fatalities. This is something that is a real-world event, impacting people's lives right now, and that level of disruption on a major scale could be leveraged by external actors to destabilize society if they so wished.
Exactly. They could use the chaos of the storm to launch other attacks, and it's harder to respond when everything is already disrupted. It's all part of the same game. Divide and conquer, create chaos and confusion, make people doubt everything, and there is no shortage of groups willing to exploit it for their own ends.
I think we need to focus on resilience and preparation. We need to have better emergency response plans, stronger infrastructure, and more community support systems. We need to learn to cope with these types of events, whether they are natural or man-made.
Yeah, we should have like apocalypse preparedness seminars. They'd be really popular. I'd definitely sign up, but only if there's a class on how to make the perfect doomsday cocktail.
It just feels like everything is converging, right? The increase in terrorist attacks, the rise in disinformation, and now severe weather events, plus all of the other issues we've touched on. Are they interconnected? Is there a hidden hand at work? We keep seeing these patterns that feel like they could be orchestrated, but that's just an assumption based on limited data.
They are absolutely connected. They feed off each other. These shadowy figures, they don't care about the weather, but they care about the chaos it creates. They don't cause these events directly, but they do use them to their advantage. The aim is to destabilize society, to erode trust, and to create an environment where they can seize more power.
I think we need to focus on building resilience and promoting understanding, but yes, we also need to be critical of those in power and to push for more transparency and accountability. And yes, we need to keep an eye on the potential for these events to be used by actors with malicious intent. I just don't think we should automatically jump to the conclusion that everything is orchestrated by a hidden hand.
Okay, well, whether it's orchestrated or not, the world is a dumpster fire, and we're all just roasting marshmallows on it. I'm starting a betting pool on how long it'll take for the tiny dinosaurs to make their appearance. I'm open to any investors.
It does feel like we're in a very precarious moment in time, where we are seeing the rise of these events, both natural and man-made. And it feels like it's all coming together at the same time. But like we said, we don't know if that's by design or not.
And that's why we can't afford to be complacent. We have to be constantly vigilant. We need to question everything, and we have to demand answers from the people in power. I don't trust anyone these days. I think we should look towards the shadows for some of the answers, or at least acknowledge that they exist.
I think we need to be both vigilant and hopeful. We have to push for progress, for understanding, and for a better world. And we need to acknowledge the complexity of the issues we face and not just blame everything on some shadowy group, because that does not solve the core issues of why we are in this mess to start with.
Well, I'm going to go and build my underground bunker and stock up on sarcasm and marshmallows. Who's coming with me? It's going to be epic, even if it's not the end of times.
Yeah, that's a thought. Anyway, I think we've covered a lot today. It's clear the world is a complicated place, and there are many moving parts. Whether those moving parts are by design or by circumstance is a topic for another day.
Indeed, until next week, keep your eyes open and don't trust anyone.
Let's all try to keep our heads up and look for positive changes and solutions.
And remember, if the world ends, at least we had some good snacks. Maybe. See ya next week, unless the lizard people get us first.